Hey, everybody, welcome into the podcast. We are back with another special bonus episode. I'm joining you solo today as far as our hosts go. Brad is still taking some well-deserved time off after having his baby. And we are in between seasons right now. We just wrapped up season 3 with our bracket challenge, and we're taking the month of February off from producing our regular weekly episodes. We'll be back with those at the beginning of March, but to fill out the weeks of February, we've decided to bring you some interviews that we're doing with prominent figures in the whiskey world. And boy, oh boy, do we have one with us today. We are joined by Jackie Zykan, who is the master taster at Old Forester. I can't wait to get into this conversation today. We're going to talk about her position. We're going to talk about Old Forester. We are going to talk about her favorite films, plural. Jackie, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm great. And thank you so much for having me. This is going to be so much fun.
Yeah, I can't wait. We're actually recording this on January 20th. It's Inauguration Day. So first of all, thank you for taking the time out of a momentous day like today to join me. Getting into our conversation here, I've been thinking about coming out of 2020 and the crazy year that it's been for all of us, just keeping, producing this podcast. I think I was talking with your PR rep about how right now I am recording this podcast in a literal closet in my house because COVID doesn't allow us to record in a studio right now. So I'm standing in a closet talking to you. I'm sure that the bourbon industry has had to make some crazy, workarounds to get through 2020. And I just want to ask you, how did you get through 2020? Are you doing okay?
Well, I mean, in a way, it's not over yet because it's like 2020. I think of it as like pandemic, right? And I know there's been a lot of other things going on this year too, but hopefully some of it is, about to be behind us, but we'll see. I have no complaints. I'm sitting in a good position. I'm very, very thankful for the fact that I still have a job. I work for an amazing company that really takes care of its people, and I've got a never-ending whiskey supply, so I'm good.
That always helps, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It definitely does.
So, Jackie, looking at your title, which is Master Taster at Old Forester, I have so many questions. It's hard to decide where to begin today. But I guess I'll start with this. You are someone who is heavily involved in the production side of things at Old Forester. And, looking at your bio, I see that you actually got a degree in biology and in chemistry. So you're definitely into the science behind things. What is something that stands out to you as kind of a science nerd person about the production of whiskey that just always makes you smile? Something that you just really, really love about the production side of things?
Well, honestly, with whiskey in particular, it's the fact that plan as you may, it's going to be up to that barrel and up to the tree that made it. And the end result is always kind of a surprise. I mean, you have sort of a range that you can expect flavor to end up in, but the variable is that barrel and you have no control over it. And so that's honestly something that's just constantly fresh and is constantly a challenge. And it's exciting. It's so great to be able to discover new flavors just by accident, really, if you will.
I imagine there has to be like a frustrating element to that too, though,
Yeah.
when you know that like what's going in the barrel is so good and then it comes out with these really funky flavors sometimes.
Well, even those funky flavors can be really interesting to blend with. I think the part that kind of is the damper on it is if that barrel doesn't hold the liquid you want it to, and you end up with nothing. Those are the disappointing barrels for sure. But as long as you do your due diligence on the front end and put everything as high quality as you can in that barrel, you should be in a good spot. But when the barrel yields something that tastes like, I don't know, grape big league chew gum, and you're like, where did that come from? I don't know. It's just like these weird little moments of serendipity, if you will. So
I love that tasting note, by the way. And my co-host Brad is always laughing at me because I'm like, like the chubby kid who just has a wide range of candy knowledge from growing up. And I'm constantly comparing things to like Jolly Ranchers or whatever. As you're developing your palate, as you've worked your way up through Brown-Forman, what has it been like to like call back to some of those like childhood things? Is that what really kind of helped formulate and form your palate? Or is it more of like the intricate things that you're tasting now as an adult?
Well, I mean, I think the things that pop up front and center are always going to be those near and dear to your heart. You start developing your palate the second you start eating and smelling. So you are actually developing it your entire life, and you're banking in all those sensory memories that help you articulate what you're finding. If you've never tasted Big League Chew grape bubblegum, for example, you're never going to use that as a tasting note, right? You're not just going to randomly, I guess it might taste what I think that might taste like. But with this position, though, it's not always about writing out those tasting notes. It's more so a quality control situation. And so the big change for me was having to go through and train myself to find the negative stuff, that if the mash was burnt, or if the pH was off, or if there's too much of one compound over another and it's out of the range that we accept for it. And so it's beautiful and it's wonderful, but it does change the way you taste your whiskey and everybody else's whiskey from that point forward. You never think of it the same because you're trained to look for defect. And so I drink a lot of tequila. That's like shut my mind off. I'm just going to go play over here for a little bit. So
I like that. And that really kind of leads me into a conversation or a question, I guess, about this role of master taster. You know, we've interviewed a lot of people who have the title of master distiller, and I've only seen a few people in the industry that have been given this title of master taster. So for our listeners, can you kind of break down the differences between the two and why specifically, you know, you all hit on the role of master taster?
Sure. So it is a unique position, and I know that they do have it in one way, shape, or form at other distilleries and in other industries as well. I mean, there's restaurant groups, there's food processing companies that have master tasters too. And their job obviously is focused on something different than whiskey. But Brown-Forman has this position because to this company, it was founded on quality and consistency, no matter what. Every single brand we have follows those pillars, no matter what. And so it really, really is key to have sort of a person that has a say-so of like, this batch isn't going to make it, or this batch is. And don't get me wrong, we do have a massive team of sensory scientists who are fantastic. And it does take a village, because if I get a cold, we don't stop making whiskey. Right. But it's really, really integral. The human element of tasting and analyzing the liquid is so, so important to ensuring that we're always living up to those promises.
So when I think about the language of master taster, though, I almost feel like that puts you in a position that even some master distillers aren't in, which is like the taste of the whiskey kind of rests on your shoulders in a way. It's language that we're not used to seeing a lot. And so do you feel like your particular palate or your sense of what a bourbon should taste like is something that Old Forester really wanted to invest in?
Sure. And I think I came from a different background. I know I came from a quite different background than most of the other people that have held this role. I think the last master taster we had was Elizabeth. She was master taster at Woodford, and she's now the assistant master distiller. So you're not only dealing with the liquid in a post-maturation phase, you're also doing sensory analysis on the distillate, and you do have to understand all of the different variables that go into making that process happen. So I don't know, no one's ever asked me what is the difference between master distiller, master taster. I mean, I guess like at the end of the day, if I say something and Chris Morris disagrees with me, his word goes. He definitely outranks me. But he's a little bit more involved in the process of pre-barrel, and I'm more involved in the process of post-barrel. So this role, where it goes from here, goes more into sort of the blending side of things as opposed to the distilling side of things. That's kind of the trajectory of it.
That's really helpful to make that distinction. I think that helps me understand it a little bit better. And kind of on that note, can you go in a little bit on your relationship with Chris Morris? We actually just had him and Elizabeth on the show a couple months ago. And so, you know, he has kind of taken over this role specifically at Woodford now, but I know that he's also kind of considered the master distiller for Brown-Forman as a whole. Can you explain what's happened there with kind of the movement that's been going around? Sure.
So, I mean, I think we're all pretty familiar with the fact that there is this bourbon boom going on, and it has been going on for quite a few years. And at Brown-Forman, we are fortunate to have so many great American whiskeys in our portfolio. And so at the genesis of Chris's role as master distiller for Brown-Forman, all of these brands were still kind of micro, right? So as they all start growing, the responsibilities start growing. And a large part of these roles, whether it's master taster, master distiller, assistant master distiller, doesn't matter, involves a lot of travel, a lot of advocacy work, and a lot of sort of ambassadorship, if you will. Well, Chris is only one person. So of course, they're going to have to bring on other roles to branch out and cover our territories. So my job kind of fills in where his demands are more so on Woodford now, but I am Old Forester only. Woodford has taken off, and so definitely deserves the attention from him. And he and I do still work together on things like birthday bourbon. But there are a lot of projects that have now kind of fallen just onto my plate, like the President's Choice selections, some exciting upcoming things for 2021 that I am not allowed to talk about yet because the press release hasn't gone out yet. Okay. But slowly but surely he has peeled back from Old Forester, and Old Forester is now growing so exponentially that my role is kind of filling in where his shoes were. So it's exciting. It's great. It's a great time to be in bourbon.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of segues us into talking about Old Forester as a brand. The thing I love about Old Forester, and, please forgive me if I just call it Olfo every once in a while, because that's
okay. I do the same. So
all right, good.
Same language.
The great thing about your kind of baseline Old Forester is that it's always been known as kind of a best value bourbon for people who are in the know. I know bartenders love to use it, especially because it's good neat. It's good in a cocktail. It really stands up to a couple ice cubes. Does knowing that Old Forester is like the whiskey of choice for price conscious people, does that affect the decisions that you make in terms of branding or in terms of expanding the kind of portfolio?
It does to a certain degree. We are going to do what we want to do, and that's kind of one part of it. But we're also a brand that has really accepted the fact that in order to survive the long term, you do have to pay attention to what the people want. And if trends are kind of going in the way of more high proof things, then people keep asking us, why can't I just get this at barrel strength? We're going to listen to that, and we're going to do it in our way. We're not just going to randomly throw whiskey in a bottle at barrel proof and go, here you go. We're going to do it in the most high quality way we possibly can so that we are the best barrel proof out of all the barrel proofs out there. But we definitely do take that into account, the change in consumer demands. And Old Forester, as a brand that has been around for, now I can officially say, over 150 years, because 2020 was our 150th anniversary. It is absolutely key that as long as you hold on to those core principles, and like I mentioned earlier, quality and consistency, no matter what, the rest of it is kind of up to you to see how you deliver that. But you have to keep adapting, and you have to keep molding around. The introduction of the 86 proof everyday Olfo, as we call it, was back in the 50s. And that was in response to blended whiskeys gaining popularity. So the consumer's palate kind of changed a little bit into something a little bit lighter and crisper, and not that big diesel fuel cowboy juice anymore of the bottled in bond. So I would definitely say that Old Forester has been one of the most adaptive brands throughout the timeline of American whiskeys. And that's kind of what gives us so much strength.
Well, yeah, and that adaptability really carries through even into some of your higher end expressions that you're producing now. And the thing that it just fascinates me, and I'm excited to hear you talk about it, is that Old Forester has overcome, I guess, the pigeonholing of brands, if I can call it that. Like, there are just certain brands that we know are like bottom shelf fixtures, and they're just a great bang for your buck. And then there are other brands that specifically cater to kind of higher end clientele. Old Forester might be really the only one I can think of that runs like the entire gamut, or, spans the whole spectrum. Like, you have your $20 bottle of Olfo, and then you have your birthday bourbon. And I guess I'm wondering, like, from a branding perspective, from a PR perspective, not just from a production side of things, how have you guys been able to overcome that sort of pigeonholing? How have you been able to build that level of respect from your lower entry kind of bourbons all the way up to the super allocated, hard to get kind of things?
Yeah. I mean, we have done our due diligence to make sure that no matter what expression in that range that you stated is absolutely the best whiskey that you're going to find. I mean, that's how you do it. You don't just put like, oh, we got some shabby barrels. we'll water them back, filter the hell out of them and sell it for $15 and keep it on the bottom shelf. And that's where it's going to live.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then, let's take these cherry barrels and slap a different brand name on them, which a lot of distilleries do, which is something that I don't think a lot of people are really that aware of. With Old Forester, we stayed true to the Old Forester name because honestly, it all starts out Old Forester distillate. We're not out there trying to makeshift a brand name for something to justify a different price point. We've done a really, really good job of making sure there is an Old Forester for every occasion and for every whiskey drinker's preference out there. And like you said, it does run the gamut. I mean, you're going from $20 all the way up to $180, and then we won't even get into secondary market pricing on some of this stuff. It's insane. But I can assure you that every bottle of 86 proof gets just as much thought, consideration, and quality check as every batch of birthday bourbon. So we just kind of stay true to that.
Yeah, and it seems like you guys are doing a great job with it. And part of what I really love about talking to you in particular about this is that in your background, you not only have the science, the degrees to, add to your bona fides, but you worked as a bartender for a long time and you were a beverage director for a long time. How did that particular role or that season of life kind of prepare you to take over Old Forester, a brand that is a bartender favorite? Like, does having that in mind kind of keep you conscious of what you need to be producing?
Oh, completely. I think about things from a completely different perspective. I think about things from the buyer's perspective, not necessarily from this ivory tower of, green is on trend, so we're going to put green on the label this year. No, it's totally different to think of it that way. Every time we go in for package changing, anytime we go in for label changes, anytime we go in for cocktail strategy or marketing changes, I am a huge piece of that conversation of saying, well, this is how it's going to come across. And let's keep that in mind. And maybe we can do it differently to make it a little bit more conducive for the people who actually want to be purchasing our stuff. So, and the cocktail side of it was definitely a big part of it. So, I mean, Old Forester is absolutely delicious on its own. I, by no means, am a purist. If anyone out there is like, cool, if you're not cool, whatever, I don't really judge you. But the cocktail is kind of the best entry point into a new spirit category. And especially now with bourbon kind of going crazy and this sort of, you're raising this like, what is a bourbon drinker definition from, don't ruin it. Don't put something in it. You have to appreciate it for what it is. No, you're drinking a drink and you better enjoy it. If you don't, why are you drinking it? Just don't. Right. So if you have to mix it in a cocktail, cool. I'm right there with you. I drink more cocktails than neat whiskey anyways. But that background and having that perspective really, really helps us maintain a lot of integrity, especially when it comes to our marketing strategies. I was a buyer in Kentucky at a major whiskey bar, and you can sniff out the BS, if you will, very, very, very easily. Yep. And I think it's really, really important for Old Forester to always be that brand that really doesn't have to force a marketing story. We just tell our history and it's genuine. And that background is actually one of the main reasons that I was chosen for this position, because it was the balance of the science and then the balance of the application of it out in the public, if you will. It's really important.
I feel like with the people that we've been interviewing for the podcast, master distillers, both at kind of these bigger, corporations and also on the smaller craft level, it really seems like the biggest trend in the industry right now is just transparency, that people are starting to recognize that the consumer appreciates, whether it's just like putting the mash bill on the label or it's what you're talking about and saying, yes, we totally understand the bartender's dilemma, right? How have you seen the industry adapt to being more transparent, even just since you've taken over your role?
Well, I mean, with the instant gratification of info coming from your phone, there's no stone unturned anymore. And as people start to get more invested in a category of spirits and they start actually like researching what goes into it in order to differentiate it, right? Because we've had this mass flooding of different products out there in this category. Everyone is clinging to whatever little pebble they can to make themselves stand out differently. And this is great because there are a lot of people that have offered up information and insights to honor that. But at the same time, you're still going to get the people that are like, well, they've got a backstory and they've got this history. We need that. And so they just make up whatever. My
Yep.
grandpappy in the backwoods with a coonskin cap was dipping his finger in this and saying it was good back in the day. And, there still is some work to be done from the consumer standpoint as far as differentiating fact from fiction in the bourbon world. It's just how it is. It's going to be that way. But I'm really happy to see other people and ourselves, especially, offering up more of that information on the front line, because the consumer deserves to know what they're buying. This is something you're putting into your body. You're ingesting this. So you should know the full process all the way through. It's the same thing. And people are more and more engaged with that now than ever, especially if people start taking more interest in where their food comes from and what was the name of the chicken that I just ate and all of that fun stuff. Yeah. We're just part and parcel with all of that.
So because I'm trusting you here, I know that you're being open and transparent with me. I've actually never done this in an interview before, but these questions got by your PR person, so I'm going to go ahead and ask them. When you look at the whole brand of Old Forester, and how many expressions are you guys currently producing right now?
We've got 3 core, 4 whiskey row. Statesman is kind of the rando, and then the single barrels, so barrel proof, 100 proof, and then President's Choice Birthday. That puts us at 12.
12. So when you look at the whole spectrum of Olfo, what's your personal favorite to drink?
I get asked this a lot, actually.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
So no worries there at all whatsoever. And I got to be careful how I answer, because once I answered it in a way that made sense to me and somebody took it in the wrong direction, I was like, it's of the moon. And they were like, oh, can we follow up and have a talk about how your palate changes with the lunar cycle? And I was like, no, it's not about that. I mean, like, if I've had a bad day, I'm probably reaching for a different one than the other. But honestly, the best way that I can give this answer to you is I have to really reflect on which bottle moves the most in my house. Right. Mm-hmm. And when I go out and about in public, which one do I usually find myself ordering? And it is the 100 proof everyday Old Forester, because I drink old fashions, and that is the hands down best Old Forester out there for an old fashioned. That is my go-to.
I love it. I was hoping that you weren't going to just like turn this into a commercial for like whatever the upcoming product was going to be.
No, not at all. Yeah, they're all so different. Sometimes you want a spicy one, you go 1897. Sometimes you want something a little bit more sessionable. If you know you're going to have a few, and you go 86 or 1870. But yeah, truth be told, the 100 proof is what moves in my house. That's what I buy the most of. So that's got to be it, right? That's the answer.
So follow up then, across the board at all the different price ranges that you have, which one would you say is the best bang for your buck?
The 100 proof.
Wow.
I know what goes into it. And I obviously know the flavor. Gotta hope I know the flavor profile of it. And for the price on it, it is just hands down the best bang. Yeah. I mean, they're all great and they're all priced accordingly. We actually have very long argumentative discussions about capping prices on them and making sure we're not gouging or anything of that sort, and always staying at an approachable price point. But yeah, that 100 proof, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. It really doesn't.
So you were talking about Statesman as kind of the rando of the group, and I love that terminology. I wish you would just put that in the copy on the label. That'd be great. But when you think of all 12 expressions, which one would you say has the most unique flavor profile of the 12?
The 1910. By far, because it is the only one that actually goes into a secondary barreling. So it's the only double-barreled expression we have. So blend as you want, choose your barrels as you want. You're never going to achieve that mixing and matching the other stocks and get anything even close. The 1910 is incredibly unique.
So kind of on that note, though, I've always wondered about this. When you are kind of the person for a brand, when your palate is dictating kind of where things go, how do you find the balance there between like what the world knows as the Old Forester flavor profile and what your own personal palate or preferences are?
Well, I mean, I have the luxury of working with a brand that has such a widespread range of flavors, right? So even as we age, our palates shift. As our taste buds die off and don't regenerate, we actually tend to lean more towards higher tannin items and things that have a little bit more bite because we have less taste buds to pick it up. So you need something that's a bigger bang. So it's great. I'm in a position, if I stay with Old Forester, which I have no intention of not, that I'll have an Old Forester suited for me the rest of my life, which is awesome. But I do tend to lean more towards a sweeter side than a spicier side.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, there is this baseline of balance and a baseline of quality that always, always, always takes precedence. Now, if I'm going to pour myself a drink, I know what I'll pour. But when it comes to making sure things taste the same, it doesn't matter what your personal preference is. You're matching item for item, batch by batch. And when it comes to quality assurance, same thing. You're looking for defect or lack of defect or things of that sort. So that part really doesn't play into it so much. Now, like I said, maybe if I was a spice hound or a rye head, I would be sipping on the 1897 or our core expression of rye regularly, but I don't. The spicy guys out there and gals can have that one. I'll sip on my hundo and sit back and throw some sugar in it.
I love it. All right. Well, I'm going to let you get off the hot seat here. I feel like I've grilled you enough for now.
That's okay. This is my job.
That's good.
It's okay.
That's good. You can take it. So we're going to move into the second half of the episode here where we start talking about your favorite movie. And this is my favorite part because I get to ask questions of people who aren't used to being asked questions like this. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure, just like you said, people have asked you what your favorite expression of Old Forester is 1,000 times. But hopefully you have not done too many interviews where you've talked about your favorite movie.
Never once.
And that's awesome. And what we have found though is people who are in the industry that you're in, especially distillers, master tasters, you guys get so intricate with what you do that I've found that you are some of the best people to talk movies with because you see details in movies that you can call out maybe that the average person isn't looking for. And I feel like I'm setting you up here to just give us the deepest analysis.
I know, careful how high you set the bar on this one. You're going to be great at this. Okay.
No, but see, your enthusiasm is what is getting me into this because when we asked you to give us your favorite movie, we actually got back a whole list of movies. And that is awesome. So the ones that I got back for you, and I'm going to double check that these are in fact your favorite films, that we could talk about American Psycho, the 2000 movie with Christian Bale, any Wes Anderson film.
Yes.
And any vintage James Bond movie.
Yes.
All right, listen, we're just going to go through all of these because I'm pumped to do this, but
it's kind of a weird spread. I realize that, and I don't know, judge me not, but yeah, let's do it.
Well, that's the great thing about trying to narrow down your favorite movie. Cause I get asked this all the time about my favorite movie. And the movie snob in me wants to say Casablanca. I love that movie. It's just, it never gets old. But then the 5-year-old in me, it's Jurassic Park. It's either going to be watching Humphrey Bogart fall in love or it's going to be watching a T-Rex eat a guy off a toilet. Those are my two extremes. So I'm glad that we have a nice representation here. Let's just go ahead and start with American Psycho. That's a movie that I don't think I've watched that movie in probably a decade. And
oh my gosh,
most of us have seen this movie. We all know Christian Bale as a serial killer yuppie in the 1980s. What is it about that movie that just does it for you?
Okay. So, and I have to preface this random list of movies I gave you. I approached this with the exact same mentality of the question you asked earlier about which of the whiskeys is your favorite. If to think back and go, well, which of these could I literally watch every single day and never get sick of? Which of these do I actually own? And some of them I actually own in multiple formats. I own on Amazon and on iTunes. So it doesn't matter where I'm at. I have access to it. I need it. I know it's really weird. It doesn't matter. American Psycho is just, I know this might sound really, really effed up to say this, but it's hysterical. It's absolutely hysterical to me. All the gore aside from it, it is one of those movies that if I drop a quote from that movie in conversation with people I've never met, and 1 out of 5 people gets it, you're my new best friend. Now we are on the same page that we both found the business card scene hysterical, that we both can quote this incredibly screwed up movie. The yuppie part of it is just, it's so comical. It's kind of dark the way they go about it, but I just think that it's timeless. It's just this little capture of that time in our history in America of this I'm sorry, I can't help but laugh because I realize people are being slaughtered and there's blood everywhere, but I can't help it.
No,
it is so well articulated and curated to really represent the 80s yuppie. And it's hysterical. It's absolutely how absurd it is.
Yeah, it's great. And I mean, like, it's a perfect satire of that time in our history. And I feel like it definitely kind of, it's like it came around again. Like when all of the like Occupy Wall Street stuff started again, I feel like people kept going back to, this is exactly what they were talking about in American Psycho. Like this idea of these people up in their ivory towers being completely detached from the rest of us. And it's so perfectly represented by this guy who is just murdering people and completely getting away with it because no one cares.
Right. As a person in general, I am a very down to earth, pretty low maintenance human being. And just, it's honestly just this display of comedy for me because it is a type of person that does exist, right? It is out there. It is a mentality that is out there. And it's just, I don't know, it's just so different from how I go about my day that I just find that just so amusing. I don't know.
I feel like you're second guessing yourself as you're doing
I'm
this.
definitely not. And now that we're talking about it, I'm like, I'm going to watch this tonight. Like,
Yeah.
I'm on a plane tomorrow. I'm going to watch this on the plane. Like, this is great. It's been
That's the best way to keep people away from you on the plane too. Is like when they see your little screen and yeah.
Well, okay. American Psycho falls into a certain plane rules category. It's one of the movies that you can only watch in a window seat. You cannot watch American Psycho in an aisle seat. Ever, especially middle seat. That's an absolute no-no. There are certain movies that you can only watch when you're leaning against the window and can turn your phone away from anyone else seeing. And obviously don't be that person on the plane that keeps the volume on, like invest in something, headphones, earbuds, whatever you need. Don't be that person, especially not with this one. There's some scenes that you probably shouldn't watch around other people or especially children, but you know.
That might be the best advice you've given all day.
Yes.
Like I'm out here asking questions about bourbon and you're like breaking down the anatomy of where to watch your R-rated movie on the plane. I love it. All right, so let's take a hard left turn away from American Psycho and into the extra quirky world of Wes Anderson.
Oh my God. And I have some that I will definitely watch over and over and over again. There's a couple that I'm like, I get it, like whatever, but I'll take it or leave it. But all Wes Anderson films have such an amazing aesthetic to them. And the scenes are so symmetrical. And there's something in my weird little head that just finds that so pleasing. And the storylines. So if we started, I don't know, I'm going to take it in a different direction. If we were talking about books, I am a huge, huge, huge Salinger fan. And I feel like there's sort of a common denominator here between Salinger's sort of constant strife of finding that inner child and embracing that innocence. And I feel like Wes Anderson films, every single one of them, no matter what, has that deep down at the root. But yes, the stages, you feel like you're watching a play the entire time, the way that it is set up. And I think it is every single detail put into it, every color choice, the tassels on the curtains are specifically chosen. I appreciate that there was so much work to curate such a gorgeous setting. That's why I love Wes Anderson films.
So if I could like narrow down on a couple, and I love Wes Anderson as well, but I'm with you. I think there's times where he gets so wrapped up in like the set decoration and the aesthetic that sometimes the storylines of the films themselves are kind of like, meh, you know. But there's two of them for me that just stand out above all the rest. And that would be Royal Tenenbaums and Moonrise Kingdom are my two favorites. So I mean, like if you had to choose your one or two favorites, which would you select there?
I mean, Royal Tenenbaums is up there, but I think the first and foremost for me is Darjeeling Limited. And then, so not even under that, but like half under it is Royal Tenenbaums. And then the Grand Budapest Hotel. Fabulous Mr. Fox and Moonrise Kingdom kind of hang down on the lower tier for me. But I can't even tell you the amount of times I've watched Royal Tenenbaums and the Darjeeling Limited. I mean, it's sick. I've had relationships that have gone south. They're like, why is this movie you choose? And because to your point, I totally agree with you that there is so much emphasis on the actual set that maybe the storyline does fall to crap sometimes. But that's fine because I'm just so enamored with the beauty of the film. It's like staring at a painting. It's amazing. I love Wes Anderson films.
All right, so I want to drill down on Tenenbaums, but like just give me 30 seconds on Darjeeling Limited because like you're talking about one of his probably most universally disliked movies here. Like it's probably I would say most people would put Darjeeling Limited and Life Aquatic like at the bottom of the list.
Oh my gosh, that's right. Oh my
So
gosh.
I'm interested to hear, like, you might be the world's biggest proponent of the Darjeeling Limited and not even know it. So like, what is it about that movie that does it for you?
Well, it's interesting because we just got done talking about how comical the yuppie nature of American Psycho is. And I think there are definitely some underpinnings of that in the Darjeeling Limited. You've got these three brothers that are completely estranged from each other and from their mom, who is now like living up in the mountains, right? They have sort of a very shallow depth of spirituality, we'll put it that way. And it is sort of the one is now inspired to go out and like find his like inner spirit, and like they're all coming along for the ride, and they still are toting around their vintage, exquisitely expensive, I could never ever afford custom luggage and all of these sort of like pinkies out suits and everything else like that. So it's just the juxtaposition of that. And it makes it seem like their spiritual quest is, just, oh, this is what someone said, so I'm going to hire a guru and I'm going to go do this. But it's just funny that it balances out that way. But then they do come into a couple of situations where, I know you said 30 seconds, so I'm still talking. I am probably, you're right. I'm the world's biggest Darjeeling Limited fan, like hands down. But they come across some situations that actually trigger a little bit more emotion, a little bit more depth out of them. I won't give away the whole story, so I don't ruin it for anyone out there who hasn't seen this amazing movie. But through that, and of course, it's ignited at a very, very infantile level and a very, very core small child inside level that kind of brings them together in a better way. So it's funny. They go, and the one brother has his assistant with him the whole time, like literally carrying a fax machine through India on a rackety old train in order to like have everything type A'd out. And it's funny. It's funny. I think it's funny and it's beautiful.
I'll say this, if nothing else, that movie introduced me to that great French song, Aux Champs-Élysées, at the end. I remember specifically, like, being in college, I put that on my iPod. I was so pretentious. And, like, I would drive around campus blasting this obscure French Wes Anderson. That song slaps. I don't care what anyone says.
Hey, I'm all for it. And yes, also note out there, if you haven't seen it and you have no intention of seeing it, just give it a whirl, but make sure you watch the edition that has the short film in the front end of it, because it will give you so much more context in the big picture of one of the brothers.
Oh, that's the one with Natalie Portman, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You need that. You need that part.
I love it. Doing deep dives here on Wes Anderson.
I know.
All right, so I have to talk about Royal Tenenbaums because it was the biggest like blind spot for me in his whole filmography. I hadn't seen it. I think I came into Wes Anderson, Life Aquatic was the first one I saw, and then I've seen everyone he's made since then. But it took me a long time to go back and watch Bottle Rocket and Rushmore and Tenenbaums. Mm-hmm. And I finally got around to watching Tenenbaums, I'd say 5-6 months ago, and it absolutely blew me away. And I think the thing that was missing in so many of his other movies that didn't quite live up to it was that it really has this emotional human core to it that some of the other movies, it just seems like the people are more like set dressing. And when you get to the end of Tenenbaums, and actually we're going to be doing Royal Tenenbaums in season 4, which is upcoming. So this is like our precursor to talking about it. But when you get to the end of Tenenbaums and Ben Stiller is just laying on the ground and saying, "It's been a hard year, Dad," I'm crying at the end of this movie. And I never thought that a Wes Anderson movie could move me to tears. And that one so successfully did it. I don't think anything can ever top that one for me.
Looking at it from that perspective, I can see why this one would be sort of at the top of the list for you, especially. This one is really, really impressive because for the amount of different characters you have involved in this one film that's still trapped in the same amount of time as every other film out there, the depth of character that you understand and the development of them is actually, I think it's probably the heaviest out of all of his films. I will definitely give that up there. And you really do connect with them. And you're right. There is that sort of the clincher at the end there is so human and is so pure. But again, he does balance that with some absolutely beautifully staged sets. Absolutely. Every little detail is absolutely just perfect. And it just, there are some very, very talented people and always like a mass amount of very, very talented people in his films. I'll give him that. But I feel like with this one, I don't know. I don't want to say that they're so fine-tuned and focused in their character that they're flat. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I think you get just enough to really understand each and every one of them. And it is a really great story, and it definitely has enough interesting tidbits to keep you entertained. I mean, I'm sitting here going through my mind of every single person that's in it and just the uniqueness of every single one of them. I think it's fantastic. I'm really glad you guys are doing that one because, oh my gosh, such a great film. I love Royal Tenenbaums.
All right, we're going to leave Wes Andersonville, and we're going to take one more hard turn into James Bond.
Oh!
I'm kind of pumped for this part here. Now, you specifically wanted to talk about vintage Bond, and
yes.
I have to ask, like, what's your definition? What constitutes vintage Bond versus modern Bond?
So if I had to choose what I was going to throw on in the background of my life here, or what I was actually going to pay attention to and watch, I just tend to gravitate more towards the retro. There's something different about it. It's something that's unapologetically sexist. I will throw that out there. Like, truth be told, people, like, yes, trust me, I understand that I'm a woman and I work in a male-dominated industry, and I probably shouldn't advocate for things like vintage James Bond movies, but it is classy, it's fantasy, it's not to be taken literally or seriously, and just, again, with the same thing, I'm obviously one that is a sucker for aesthetics. When you're going from these beautifully designed sets and just like, some of it can be corny, I'm not gonna lie, like that's kind of one of the best parts about the vintage ones is that it's corny and it keeps you in that mind space of this is fantasy. Some of the more modern ones, I think you get a little bit too involved in it because it's modern day and time. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, I love Pierce Brosnan, but he can stay in Mrs. Doubtfire as far as I'm concerned. He's definitely not my favorite Bond. I am a Sean Connery person. By far, hands down, the best Bond there is. And Dr. No, that's why Dr. No pops up. Dr. No is just, it's a beautiful film. The colors and the way that everything is laid out and designed, the clothes, everything about it is just, it's sexy. It's just sexy. I love Bond films.
Well, and I think that there's a reason that we keep calling back to those movies too. Like even in Skyfall, they brought back the Aston Martin from the Connery era. Like, there's just something so, not just nostalgia, but there's an idea that we have in our minds of what a Bond movie is supposed to be. And I think that we're still trying to match the bar that was set by Sean Connery.
For sure. I can definitely agree with that.
So listen, I'm completely with you on the sexist, misogynist, chauvinistic elements of the old movies. I just watched Goldfinger again last month.
Oh, man. I just watched that maybe like a month and a half ago. But corny. I mean, corny. Let's be honest. Like, there's a corniness to it, just in that. Keep going though. But keep going.
Well, no, I was just going to say, like, there's just, first of all, I forgot that the whole end of that movie takes place in Kentucky. And it was just really cool to see 1960s Kentucky in that movie, because part of it was filmed on location there. But there is just something so weird. And it seems like such a different time in our history that, like, I don't know. I'm with you there. Like, you want to denounce that behavior, but then there's also like this, okay, I know that I'm watching something from a bygone time, and it allows me to kind of detach from it in a way.
No, completely. And also, like, taking into account the fact that, like, here is a normal human being that's like doing things normal human beings shouldn't be doing. And they're going to all these exotic places, and money's never an option. And like, the whole thing about it is fantasy anyways. So that kind of keeps you in perspective. That's what I'm saying about like the more modern ones. Like, even though they're just as elaborate and explosive, it's just hard to see something more modern and they're treating women that way. When you look back at the old ones, I mean, that is like 60s. We're talking like a very, very, very different time as far as equal rights. And like, it's there, every single one of them has a woman in some sort of entertainment position, right? There's always a belly dancer. There's always someone scantily clad. There's always someone who's always submissive. The woman is definitely not the hero. However, they do play an integral role in the final end. But you're right. There's a lot of physical conduct that is definitely not acceptable in today's day and age. And I'm not saying it should be. Please note, I am not saying any of this is okay. But just the way that the movie is staged and the story and everything else is so, fantasy is the best word I can come up with for this. It's just that you don't sort of judge it the same way as you do real life. You kind of just take it for what it is. And I don't know. There's that.
So in the spirit of not objectifying people in the way that the old Bond films did, I don't know how else to ask this question, though. But one thing that really stood out to me watching Goldfinger was just how absolutely hairy Sean Connery is. And I have to ask, like, should we bring back Harry Bond?
I don't know. See, I don't know if it has a place because our opinions of such matters have shifted, just like the assaults in these movies on women and things of that sort. Some things are just best left back in a vintage Bond film, and we'll leave them there. I don't know. I'm not opposed to hair. I'm not opposed to no hair. Like, I really don't have a preference. I'm just saying, I don't necessarily think we're going to inspire everyone to go back and watch From Russia with Love and then be like, that is sexy. Hair is really sexy. Like, that's not going to happen. So we'll just leave it at that. I don't think it's coming back.
All right, I'll drop my crusade to bring back chest hair. That's fine.
You know
That's
what?
fine.
You feel empowered to do whatever you want to bring it back. Be the one to bring it back.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right, so before we get out of here today, though, I don't mean to take such an immediate hard turn into serious matters, but we've been kind of dabbling in talking about industries where women are underrepresented, and today's kind of a momentous day. We have our first female vice president being sworn in here in just a couple hours. I hate to make you the representative for women in the bourbon industry, but I'm sure this is a question that not many people get to be asked being in your position. I mean, what is it like having to carry the mantle for women in some ways in your industry? And are you seeing progress as we continue on into 2021 in terms of that representation?
Well, okay. So it's really interesting to talk about this. So there is Jackie at office, and then there's Jackie out in the world on the road, or, when there's not a pandemic going on. And there is a big difference. Brown-Forman does a great job of never making you feel like you're a woman in whiskey. You're just doing your job, right?
Yeah.
So you don't ever think twice about it. I don't think twice about it. I didn't grow up thinking I'm going to go prove a point. Like, it wasn't like that. I will acknowledge that I accept the fact that I have a responsibility as a person that is in a visible position in a male-dominated field, that even just being here, I don't have to say anything, have an opinion about anything. Just being present and being seen as that is changing things. And that's fine. You're shifting what whiskey looks like. And now when I'm out and about, I mean, cultures are different here, there, and wherever. And I'm in a global position. And so it's different everywhere I go. That's when I see a little bit of like, oh, wait, I don't feel as safe and cozy as I do back in the corporate office. But I guess it's hard for me to articulate what it's like because I don't know what it's like to not be a woman in alcohol related industries. Right. So like, I don't know what it's like for a dude to go out and do his thing in whiskey. So I don't have anything to really compare it to. I know my boundaries, and I know that things are said or done, or situations that I've been in, and there have been many of them where my gut is like, oh, that's not right. Where I feel like I'm in a vintage Bond film. Look, we're tying it all back full circle here. But it's one of those things that I don't really spend too much time and energy worrying about. I just wake up and I do my job, and then I go home and I have my tequila, and I just kind of brush it off. But it is shifting. And it's not even so much that it's women in production whiskey. They've always been there. It's that the consumer's idea of what a whiskey drinker looks like is different, because a lot of marketing and agency positions have actually shifted from being male dominated to having more of a diverse voice behind them. And so those decisions are being made on how products are showcased and what does the occasion look like for the Old Forester drinker? What is the Old Forester drinker? What is the bourbon drinker in general? When you start changing up what your ads look like and how things are actually marketed, and you're not using big, giant, heavy glassware, that's a very masculine choice to do. And you're making things a little bit more, I hate to say it, but a little bit more feminine. It appeals to a feminine consumer. Okay. Well, then all of a sudden you have all these women start drinking whiskey. Truth be told, people, guess what? A lot of the choices you make out there are based on the sort of like meanderings of marketing decisions that float around in your mind that you aren't consciously aware of. So it's an interesting shift. I'm sure there's been plenty of women drinking whiskey forever. We just think of them as like tough old Sally, she was a tough old broad, like, because you're trying to superimpose masculine qualities onto that. But I think that if you really, really, really could look at the whole picture, which you'll never be able to, because that's not physically possible. But if you look at the whole picture of every consumer of whiskey and every representative of whiskey over time, I don't think that it's really necessarily that big of a difference. It's just that what you're being displayed in those marketing measures is actually quite different now than it was. So it's different. I don't know. I just went on a tangent. I'm sorry.
No. I love that because it does kind of bring us full circle to what we were talking about at the beginning. And even your response about why you love Olfo 100, like it stands up in a cocktail. It stands up neat. I feel like the sense that I'm getting from the industry is kind of what you are referring to. Like there is a tangible effort to be more inclusive and representative, but also to just change the way people think about drinking whiskey in general. And as a result of that change in thought process or change in marketing or whatever you want to call it, we are seeing the industry kind of naturally grow more inclusive as well. You know, like 20 years ago, you did not see the industry talking about using bourbon, using whiskey in a cocktail. The cocktail was not something that they were like making the cornerstone of an ad campaign. Now it's different. And I feel like we've really seen the industry grow into affirming, hey, drink this however you like to drink it, because it's really all the same to us at the end of the day.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That purist culture is really, it's still there. It's alive and well. There's a lot of people that still hold pretty true to it. But for us, I can only speak on behalf of Forster. I can't speak on behalf of other distilleries or other brands. But for us, we are very much, we're here for you. And if you don't like it, cool too. Like we don't really judge. We're just going to do our thing because that's what we're here to do. However you want to enjoy it is the right way to enjoy it, as long as you actually enjoy it.
Well, Jackie, I cannot say thank you enough for joining us today. This is releasing February 2021. So I have to ask, I know that you have some top secret things you can't share, but is there anything that you can kind of plug here on the podcast? Upcoming things for Old Forester, current things in 2021 that you want to mention before we leave?
It's going to be a really, really exciting year. I know. I want to be able to say all of the things so badly. Trust me, I really, really, really want to, but I will get in so much trouble.
Okay.
But just keep an eye on Old Foe. If you haven't tried it, give it a whirl. If you like it, cool. If you don't, cool. It's fine. But whatever you do, go watch the Darjeeling Limited.
That's the important lesson from today.
Yes, yeah.
Everybody, this has been Jackie Zykan. She is the master taster at Old Forester. We'll be back next week with another one of these interviews. But until then, I'm Bob Book, and that has been Jackie Zykan. Thank you again, Jackie.
Thank you so much.